Hello and welcome to MongoDB TV. I'm McAllister. I'm one of the leads on the developer relations team here at MongoDB, and it's great to have you. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Mars Lan. Mars is co-founder and CTO of Metaphor. Metaphor is building the world's leading AI-powered data governance solution, and we're going to hear all about that and where MongoDB fits into that solution as well too. And also, we're going to hear at the beginning, hopefully, the journey to Metaphor, because Metaphor as a company itself and its formation and founding is fascinating. So we've lots to get through. So let's not have me talking anymore and get Mars to join us on the live stream. Mars, you're very welcome.
Hi, Shane, and hi to all the listeners. I'm glad to be here today, and thanks for having me. Yeah.
Not at all. It's great to have you on board. When you say be here, where are you based, Mars? Where are you joining us from?
So I'm joining from the Bay Area, but Metaphor as a company is a remote-first company, so we have people all around the world. We have a small cluster of people here in the Bay Area, kind of the initial team, and we'll talk about that in our founding journey as well. So a global company, a global small startup.
Excellent, excellent. Well, look, you mentioned that the founding journey, and I know there's a story to build up in our preparation for our live stream today. I was fascinated. But first of all, you yourself, Mars, what was your path to date? Where have you, where did you learn? Where did you study? How did you get here? And what are the companies that you've been in before Metaphor and founding Metaphor?
Cool. Yeah. So some of people know me probably through my work at LinkedIn. But yes,
Mhm.
prior to that, I was at Google working on the early days of GCP in a product called App Engine, which was the the main product of the cloud offering at the time. And I was there for a couple of years, and I also got into small language model. This was when the big language model is cool. Before that, and then I got into LinkedIn to lead their data infrastructure team, specifically on the metadata infrastructure. Um, so
Okay,
yeah,
so good experience in some well-known companies and some very, very large companies.
and a lesser known thing is I'm actually a Kiwi. So I came from New Zealand. I grew up in New Zealand. I came to US to do my study, and then ended up staying here. So
Interesting. I'm a mad rugby fan, so obviously the All Blacks are the team to beat for most nations, most companies. And I apologize to our American viewers in advance who don't necessarily know too much about rugby. But my local provincial team, Munster, I'm based in Ireland, are playing the All Blacks this Saturday. So
is that right? Awesome, awesome. I'm also a big
it
fan
is
of
awesome. It's
rugby.
an awesome
Yeah.
occasion. It's an often awesome spectacle, but we're going to get beaten so badly. It'll be
Yeah,
brilliant.
well,
It'll be brilliant. I'm looking forward to
at a
today.
national level, I think Ireland's doing pretty good in general. So yeah, they're being
At,
competitive. So.
definitely at a national level, we're kind of punching above our weight a little bit, but yeah, we don't look forward to ever playing New Zealand. It's just it's never going to turn out well. We've done it a few times where it has, but we went through many years of you cannot beat the All Blacks. That was just the thing. But we've done it a couple of times in recent years. So anyway, I digress a little bit. Um, talk to me about, because I think in the context of founding Metaphor, what you were doing at LinkedIn was really important. So take us back to that time, the work that you were doing at LinkedIn, Mars, and the the backstory really that's brought you to Metaphor to today.
Sure, happy to share on that front. So when I joined LinkedIn, this was at this point almost 8 years ago, out of Google. I was leading a very small team called the metadata team. It's a brand
Mhm.
new team, and the team was formed sort of trying to solve one of the biggest problem at the time. LinkedIn was definitely trying to push for democratization of data. They want to enable as many people to use data to create value, as much insights and value as much as possible. Um, but the flip side of that is now you have a lot of people, many cooks problem essentially, right? Many people getting their fingers on data, and they're having a big a big challenge on understanding what kind of data LinkedIn has, even because people on a daily basis is creating thousands of tables and derived data and whatnot, and they don't really talk to each other, right? They talk to their immediate team. So one of the biggest, the first thing we're trying to solve is this visibility and discoverability and sort of basic understanding of data. So my team was in charge of creating a product of kind of an old prototype that was initially built called Warehouse, and we tried to basically improve on top of that. But very quickly the priority shifted. And Shen, you're from Europe, so you can probably relate to this very well. But at the time, it was GDPR, right? The big privacy
that old
law
chestnut,
that was
right? Okay.
yeah, and basically all the social network in the US is shivering when they hear the word GDPR. It's a big deal, and LinkedIn basically putting pretty much the entire data team behind us, trying to make sure that they are compliant with GDPR.
It
Right.
was a huge shift in how things were done, right? And I know obviously all the big companies, had to adopt and to change. But we saw obviously in Europe a lot of companies just not do it and pull out altogether of doing anything in Europe. So it's not to be underestimated, I suppose, what happens in the background when a policy like that comes out, right?
Absolutely, and I think LinkedIn was, one of the few company at the time that basically come to the realization of the seriousness of this, right? I think the general concept of data governance is you can have a spectrum of things you do, right? On the one hand, you can say, hey, I have zero data governance, so free for all, right? Everybody do whatever they want. Of course, it's very efficient in that sense because there's no friction, right? Anyone can see everything and get access to everything. But at the same time, we know this sort of cowboy culture is not going to work out well. It will hurt yourself in the long term. But of course, on the other extreme, where you have complete lockdown, right? Maybe like a banking environment sort of thing, right? Or very sensitive data, healthcare and whatnot. You have complete lockdown. No one get access to data, right? To get data, you have to jump through 10,000 hoops in order to get to the data, right? That is all great and good. Of course, the data is very secure. No misuse of it or whatsoever. But then at the same time, you completely stifle innovation, right? So the sweet spot of that
they're
is
very
somewhere,
much extremes, right? They're, you've got two sides of it there.
Yeah. So the sweet spot is always in the middle, right? Pretty much everything in life is kind of like that. Extreme is always gonna hurt you one way or the other. So likewise at LinkedIn, I think the culture was more towards the free for all side of the spectrum, and then they try to bring it in basically by bringing in processes and bringing in safeguard, and then all these sort of controls and whatnot to make sure that data are being used the right way. So my team, for better for worse, was the only team inside the entire LinkedIn that has visibility across everything at LinkedIn, because that was basically our charter, is to bring visibility, right? So our team immediately became that center of attention and said, hey, look, you guys have to build an entire infrastructure that basically powered all the GDPR related compliance task, right? Just including data masking, data removal, access control, and all these other things, right? And all of that's going to be powered off by the metadata that your team is going to go and enable other people to enter, generally called tagging, right? Tagging PII, as how people generally say it. So that's kind of my team basically completely got put upside down from discovery into basically a GDPR team, compliance team, right?
Wow. Okay. And with strict deadlines, right? And very kind of timely deadlines as well, too. It's always hard when there's an externally imposed deadline such as that, right?
Yeah. And at the time, it was like basically a year to a year and a half. That was the deadline we're looking at. So that was quite a crunch, right? But we managed to pull it off. We managed to solve LinkedIn's GDPR compliance problem. And whatever we built at the time, we figured that this seems like a pretty useful tool, right? And generally helping company to understand their data, right? Solve their data governance problem. So we decided that we will open source it under the moniker DataHub, right? So DataHub was the name of the project, and we open source it to the public. And it turns out that obviously LinkedIn wasn't the only company that has this problem, right? Of course, GDPR applied to everybody, but not just that. I think the whole data governance, having visibility into data, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies also going through digital transformation where they go into the cloud, where they want to enable people to use data. So the same sort of problem that LinkedIn faced a couple of years ago, everybody else started facing it at that point. So the project essentially got very, very popular in a very, very short period of time. Because everybody, no one want to reinvent the wheel, right? So
yeah, and was like going open source in with what you've solved with inside LinkedIn, kind of backed and endorsed by LinkedIn itself for this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's all credits to LinkedIn. It has a very
Mm-hmm.
good culture of basically open sourcing all these internal infrastructure, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think the one that your listener probably most familiar with is Kafka, right? Apache Kafka.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In fact, that actually also give birth to another company called Confluent, right? Of course, and your listener probably are also familiar with that company, very successful company as well. So I think there's a good culture of saying, hey, look, these are not our core business, right? These are not our core strengths, and we want to showcase our engineering prowess by sort of open sourcing these and sharing with other people, and of course in the same process getting hopefully input contribution from the community, sort of improve our internal process as well as a result of that. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And just before we go into the details of DataHub, then just give us a sense of the scale of this GDPR project within LinkedIn. The I suppose the many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users, etc. In terms of how you went about solving something at that scale, Mars.
A very good question. Actually, it's also sort of tied into the architecture of DataHub and to a great extent metaphor as well. So at the time, given the short time that we have to the short deadline we have to work against, and also given that LinkedIn has a culture of building a lot of things internally, right? So there's a lot of proprietary system, right? There's a team behind. They have its own NoSQL database. It has its own, streaming processing system. It has its own, like pretty much everything. It has its own copy, like similar to like sort of Google culture. Essentially, I guess there's a big part of that. So our team basically have to integrate. I think at the time we counted like 20 or 30 different systems inside of LinkedIn, because these are all the systems that can potentially host data, right? So we need to know what they are and what they contain. So as a team, the single team of, at the time, sub 10 engineers, it's not possible for us to integrate with all of these things ourselves. So in order to work with the deadline, in order to sort of leverage the bigger team as a whole, we basically turn this whole thing upside down and say, hey, look, instead of us connecting to your system and grab the metadata from your system, you guys are in charge of pushing the metadata to us. We'll define the interface, we'll define the standard, so to speak. And you guys push all the metadata to us. There's obviously the immediate benefit of offloading the work to another team, but it also has the side benefit of getting the metadata on time, right? Because now instead of having something that connect and pull the metadata on a regular basis, they can actually send the metadata whenever something changes on their side, right? So you can have most up-to-date metadata with sort of minimum latency when things get changed. And then of course that change a lot of time trigger, downstream activity, right? For example, if something now that wasn't PII and now marked as PII, then there's a whole bunch of downstream process that will essentially kick off at some point, right? So having the latest metadata in the shortest possible time is beneficial in that sense.
Okay, but you had to define the structure of that metadata and the schema of that data for all those 10 or more departments that had, PII data that they needed to be able to share with yourselves, right?
Yes, absolutely. So as a central team, that becomes the responsibility of defining that and offering that to various teams. And of course, hand-holding them on doing the actual integration, but we don't have to do the integration ourselves. And in fact, we probably wouldn't be a very good team to do that because we don't know their system well, right? They know their system far better than we do. So
okay, that's brilliant. And I'm just shout out to a couple of the folks who've messaged us so far. If anyone's joined late, do introduce yourself in the comments and chat. Let us know where you're joining from. But Krutart from India, Krishna also from India, and Thomas from Seattle. Good to get your comments. Please And Thomas, you played rugby for 6 weeks. Why didn't you play rugby for longer? But anyway, we get distracted. So do throw any comments that you might have for anything that we're discussing. And later on, as we go through the bit of a demo as well, too, particularly in what you see there. This is as interactive as we like to be. So please, any comments, throw up there. So in terms of what you were building there and LinkedIn wanting to showcase what they were building and tooling internally, DataHub was born. So who did your entire team become the DataHub team, or what happened, Mars?
So obviously the team behind the DataHub at LinkedIn, my team, and then we created it and open source it. And now it get popular, right? On the other side. And of course, team get excited as well, right? I mean, they feel like this is, some sort of validation that they have.
Sure.
At that moment, a bunch of top tier VC reached out to me. This include Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, Redpoint, Greylock, probably the household
all the
names.
big ones, all the well-known
all the
names,
household
right?
VCs,
Good.
right? They reached out to me and asked me directly, hey, look, we want to invest in this area. I'm very intrigued by the work that you've done at LinkedIn. Are you interested in quitting your job and start a company around this? Right?
Wow.
So it was completely unexpected, right? When we went through this whole exercise, that was never part of the plan, so to speak, right? We never knew that the thing would get so popular, and obviously less so thinking that we will start a company around this. So it was
a great validation
yeah.
of the work that you were doing and the importance of it, right?
Yes, certainly. And it certainly gave us a lot of confidence. And we obviously took it to heart and thought really long and hard about it, whether this is something that we want to create a company around. And then we did a lot of due diligence, right? Once again, thanks to all the VC who kindly opened up their network and let us talk to a lot of people in the network, executive leadership, people in the leadership roles and whatnot. For us to basically do our due diligence on this whole area and seeing whether there's a commercial value around this and whether starting a company is worth the effort, right? So after all of that, I decided, hey, look, this is very interesting. We want to go in and start a company. I was the tech lead of the team, and then the manager of the team, who I work with very closely for quite some time, also decided that two of us and plus some core engineer from the team will come out and start a company around Metaphor, right? So that's kind of how Metaphor was formed, basically. Which is a very unexpected journey, but it led to basically the starting of the company at that point. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So you took your co-founder, you took some of the team across with you, which again is, as somebody asking others to jump ship and move jobs. I mean, that's again a great kind of endorsement of where this company was going, the area that this was tackling. And especially to have those well-known VCs come in behind you as well too. But it wasn't all plain sailing though, Mars, was it? It kind of you have a bit of a U-turn in the story, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the thing about startup. If anyone's in startup would know, but anyone who's thinking about doing startup will probably find out one day is that it's never a straight line. Right?
Well, we like to call them pivots, but this was a rather big, slightly left of field pivot, I think. Most startups are used to potentially not doing the thing they said they were going to do after a period of time. But you were sticking on this track, but there was a bit of a speed bump in the road, right?
Absolutely. So when we started the company, obviously the plan was to basically commercialize DataHub, right? I mean, there's a well-established open core model. In fact, MongoDB is a very, very good example of that, right? True. So Mongo was certainly one of the great companies, open source company, we're trying to sort of model after, so to speak. And then of course, Confluent coming out of LinkedIn, right? It's another great example of that. So we actually did talk to a lot of folks, a lot of founders in the open source community and open core company, and try to learn from that, prepare ourselves for how to build a company around this. But unfortunately, this is where the twists come in, right? So one of our ex-colleagues who was also sort of tangentially related to the project and work on the project a little bit, sort of sort of got jealous of this whole process, right? He also wanted to be, also wanted to start a company around this. And fortunately, we are, as we call them, lowly engineers, and our ex-colleague is much higher up on the totem pole and much better connected with the upper management. So he was able to basically convince the upper management to kick us out of the open source project, kick us out of the Slack community that we built, and then took that over and then start a company himself, right? So that is, like you said, it's a huge, huge speed bump suddenly in this whole journey, and completely threw us off, right? I mean, we started a company unexpectedly, and then now we basically face an unexpectedly change in our course of plans, and we basically thought long and hard about it, and we have talked to a lot of founders around this, right? So it turns out that this whole open source strive, for lack of better word, or strings, is actually not uncommon at all. Most of the people are not aware of them, because they obviously, some of these are done under the table or behind behind closed door, so they don't get to see some of these action. But after talking to a lot of founders, it turns out that first of all, they are some of the great startups that came out of big tech company generally, right? There's a lot of tension between the startup and the sort of the mother company, so to speak, in terms of code ownership, right? In terms of talents, right? So if you think about it, if you start a company around this, you're obviously gonna take talents from the original company who work on this for a long time, right? And probably continue to do so over the long term as well. So there's a lot of tension around that bit, right? And also people fighting over sort of the open source ownership. That's also not uncommon as well, right? So yeah, that sort of give us some comfort around this.
Yeah, I mean, there's, as you said, there's plenty of history here. There's plenty of precedent of things, and it is a very convoluted space whereby everybody's contributing to an open source project because of the greater good and part of the community, etc. as well too. But within that, then you get this push pull, especially if it's come from left of field and unexpected. But I think in this instance, perhaps, and you might think of it differently because it didn't feel like that at the time, but every cloud is a silver lining. So you took this speed bump, you took this, and how did you respond? What happened then?
So we thought about our options, right? And really, it boils down to two options at the time. One is we fork the open source project, right, and then just take it our own way. And the other is to basically go our own way, right? So forget about open source and do our own thing. And we debated the merits and obviously pitfall between the two, and we decided forking wasn't a good option. And then so we decided to write everything from the ground up. And one of the biggest driver behind that was because despite of us creating DataHub, we knew there was a lot of issue with it, right? It was designed and built in a very constrained environment, right? And LinkedIn has its own preference of technologies and all that, and there's certain things. For example, a very good example is we're not able to use MongoDB as our backend, right? We have to stick with MySQL and then sort of turn that into a poor man's document store, document DB, which is terrible, by the way. It wasn't great.
Always good to hear.
But now if we have the option to basically choose our own path and choose whatever technology that's suitable for the problem at hand, then building something from scratch seems very appealing. And since we've done it once, we can probably do it again. And
there's always some efficiencies to be derived, and when you're ever revisiting old code or things that you've done, you kind of go, if I had my way, I wouldn't have done it this way now, knowing what I know now. So I would imagine there was, that blank sheet that you now had lots of advantage presented for you, even though it was a kind of a curveball you weren't expecting, right?
Absolutely. So in fact, actually, when we first started, we have a very lengthy document I've written internally that talks about all the things that we knew that wasn't great about DataHub, and we wish we would have the opportunity to rewrite, and how we will rewrite them, right? So we have basically this retrospective, if you will, of what we did with the project. And we have actually told our VC that, hey, look, we plan to rewrite the things over time, right? Obviously, not on day one. But once we realize the open source is not a viable solution path for us anymore, then I accelerate that whole thing. Like basically now it's off to the side and just go and start building this whole thing from the ground up. And then it took us about a year and a half to about 2 years to build DataHub inside of LinkedIn. Was at the peak about 15 engineers, right? And then we did the same thing outside, and by rewriting the whole thing from the ground up in 6 months, was basically less than a third of the engineer. So that was a huge
time, and with a third of the resources as well too.
Yes. Wow. So a ninefold increase in productivity, if you will, which was great. Right? I mean, it's not that we write faster code or anything like that. It was just because there's a lot of things we don't have to do, and we can leverage, right? Once again, MongoDB was our first chosen database because there's a lot of things that we did previously, inefficiencies and all these reinventing of the wheel that we don't have to do with MongoDB. So we're very happy with the result there. Yeah.
Perfect. And that's a good segue. But before we go into what you used from MongoDB in building this, and I know you kind of made some starts and some refactoring, you decided obviously that this was no longer going to be open source either. It was going to be closed source for yourselves, right?
That's correct. So one of the sort of fundamental architecture decision we made is we were ultimately a SaaS company, right? Just the same as Mongo, right? So as a SaaS company, if you decided, hey, I'm not gonna build my thing so it become a deployable, Docker image or home chart or somewhere that some other person can just pick it up and deploy, and then you have all the monitoring and all these other things that go with it, right? Then you're free from that sort of design constraint, right? And then you can develop a lot of things using cloud native technology because you don't have to worry about where it's being deployed. So that's essentially how we rebuild DataHub into Metaphor. The question around open source is, can we open source it? Absolutely. Who will we benefit by open sourcing it? It's only our competitor, right? Because no one else want to run a SaaS service, right? No one else want to run the MongoDB Atlas in their own company, right? Unless they are your competitor, right? So there's no point in going down that path. But one thing that we do open source actually, and then we talk about it publicly as well, right? All the integration bit, as we generally call them, crawlers, all of that is open source, right? And then they're open source not because we're trying to build a community around it and getting a contribution from other companies and all that. If we do, that's great, but that is not the main reason why we open source it. The reason why we open source it is because we allow some of our customers to run these crawlers directly in their VPCs or in their cloud, right? Think of it as kind of like an agent that they run inside of the cloud. So the very first question they will ask is they want to do an audit of your code, right? Making sure whatever you give them is not, some shady things that you're running, right? So having it as an open source make it super easy. That conversation basically say, hey, there you go, it's right there. You can go and take a look at it today, any day you want. It's all there. It's all under the sun. There's no secret. There's no backdoor. There's nothing there. It's all secured, right? Everything is completely checked, code scanned, and vulnerability. All of that is out in the open. And our customers love it, right? Especially, some of our customers are in the sort of the banking and financial services sectors, right? Security is front and center, right? Therefore, the first eye you have to basically meet before you can even talk to them. Having all of these things open source makes that conversation so much easier. So.
Yeah, that's a clearer path. So after the 6 months development, what time frame are we in now, Mars? When was the first version of Metaphor available?
So we at this point it's about 3 years when we initially released our first Metaphor platform, right? Obviously, the product itself evolved a lot in the past 3 years or so, and then the sort of use cases we're trying to solve also evolve quite a bit. So one of the things I want to touch on here is that not only do we rewrite the whole thing from the ground up, the infrastructure, but and whatnot, the product itself also went through a complete redesigned and reinvention there. And one of the issue that we noticed, as DataHub inside of LinkedIn, is that it was a very, very successful compliance tool. Right? It solved LinkedIn's GDPR problem. That's pretty much as good as it gets. But as kind of a search and discovery tool, as a data catalog, as a tool that help people to understand data, it actually kind of failed miserably there. Right?
Okay.
So when we came out of LinkedIn, we were thinking, why is that the case? Right. And we thought really hard about it, right? It's kind of doesn't make sense, right? If you say, hey, look, I'm going to provide you all the metadata that you ever need to make an educated decision, right? Wouldn't that be sufficient, right? Wouldn't that be enough, hook for people to come and use it? And we talked to a lot of companies that have adopted DataHub internally as well, right? And I think all of them came to the same conclusion, is that, hey, we implemented it. We asked people to come, right? We integrate with everything. We bring in all the metadata. We asked all the business people to come. We asked all the analysts to come. We asked all the data scientists to come. They did come, but then after a while, they fizzle out, right? The adoption story is always a very, very hard story. So we thought long and hard about it, and there's two things that we sort of landed it on, right? These are the two reasons. And then that's basically what we built Metaphor around, basically trying to solve these two problems,
Right.
so we can essentially solve the actual adoption issue. So the first thing is usability, right? And then this is obviously everybody want to build a user-friendly application, right? No one want to build something that's user-unfriendly. But it is a very, very important aspect, right? The sort of analogy that we like to give for people who are using DataHub, right? It's like, this is like walking into an airplane cockpit, right? So what happens is you see all the dials and all the everything, levers and everything that you can possibly control an airplane with. 99% of people will look at that and say, well, that's not for me. It's for some professionally trained pilot. And that's
we
basically
know plenty of SaaS companies and cloud companies that have their consoles very much the same, right?
Well, a lot of time when you build this is a joke back in the big data day, right? They say big data companies are dashboard company. Ultimately, they basically just throw everything on the screen, and that's very, very much true for DataHub. Right, people come in and feel like, oh, this is a very highly technical tool, right? So it's for engineers, right? It's not for me, and then they basically walk away from that. Right? And then kudos to MongoDB, for example, right? The Atlas interface, despite the target audience is being very highly technical, it is very user friendly still, right? You don't overwhelm people with every single possible thing in your face, right? You try to organize the information in such a way that people quickly find what they need, right? And then if they need to double click and find out more, they can. If they don't, they don't, right? So they don't walk. So this sort of whole information hierarchy thing is very important. But that being said, this is not rocket science, right? It's a solved problem. You just need a very good product person, a very good designer. You can solve that, right? That is not impossible to solve. The second thing is more to do with philosophy, product philosophy, right? And then that's much harder to solve, so to speak, because depending on how you look at your product and how you want to build your product, right? So one of the things we realize is, yes, people need all these information to help their work, but it is very disruptive for them to come to a different place to find that information, right? So the philosophy that we adopted at Metaphor is we want to bring the metadata to the people, not the other way around. Right?
Okay.
And what does that mean is, if we have time, we can show a quick demo of it, right? But what does that mean is you want to bring the metadata to where people actually do their work. For example, if you are someone who's an analyst, right, or business people, how do you get your work done, right? You do most of them in dashboarding system, BI system, right? Power BI, Tableau, right? That's where you basically spend most of your time to interact with data. That's almost an interface to data to them, right? They don't think in terms of Snowflake or MongoDB or all these other things, right? They think
they're not thinking of the source, right? Where it's presented is the presentation layer, for want of a better word, right?
Absolutely, right? So that's when they need most of the metadata, right? That's where they need to know where this data comes from, right? Who's the owner, who created it, right? Is there any data quality issue upstream, right? And what's all the knowledge that people, talk about how to use this dashboard, right? Is this even the official dashboard, right? All of these things, they want to have it right there and then when they're
Yes.
looking at
Yeah.
the dashboard, right? If you ask them to go to a separate catalog and to look up those information to eventually find them through a sea of dashboard there, right? That is a lot of ask, right? Most of the people will try that once or twice and then give up very quickly because it's such a disruptive to their workflow. Right? So
Yeah.
what I'm going to show you later on, hopefully in the demo, is that we basically have like a Chrome extension. Right? So whenever
Okay.
you're browsing the dashboard, you're going to have the metadata right there and then, right?
Okay.
You can put it out, you can look at them, and if you're really desperate to dig further, you can always jump from that point to the catalog, right? Of course, you cannot cram all the information in there in that sort of tight space, but you'll cram enough information in there where people will get a lot of value out of it without having to go to the catalog every single time. Right?
Okay.
So that is an example of, hey, bring the metadata to the people, not the other way around. And then there's another thing that we also invested heavily is the integration with the communication tool. Slack and
Okay.
Teams.
Okay.
These are the things that people use a lot. And that's actually where a
Mhm.
lot of questions about data being asked and being
Coming up.
answered
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Right. And this is the place where MongoDB play a big part of it because we like many other companies out there is leveraging the latest generative AI, latest large language model, latest vector database to be able to answer all these natural language questions in a natural language way, right? And then bring
Yeah.
out the most appropriate information to the people while they are in that sort of interface. Right? So
Okay.
once again, the
Excellent.
same principle, right? Bring the metadata right there into where they do their work, not the other way
Yes.
around.
Brilliant, Mars. I know that's great. And I look, we'll get to hopefully see that in the demo shortly. I suppose before we get to the demos, and we'd like to just keep the conversation high level because we create an audio podcast out of this too. So without alienating our audio listeners, we're not going to do the demo in the middle of our conversation because I'm super intrigued. But you touched on MongoDB, and it would be amiss of me not to ask how you're utilizing it and what you're doing, because I know in your story you migrated to MongoDB from other databases and other searches as well too. Tell us a little bit about that. Doesn't have to be extensive, but it's a really good story from I suppose most of the people that were joining us here on our LinkedIn and YouTube should obviously be familiar with MongoDB, but you migrated across, I think, from DocumentDB to MongoDB. I think that's when I meet potential people at events and it shows, migration always comes up. How was that?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, originally we were building our own MongoDB, right? A very
Yeah.
simplified version of it out of MySQL. So that's iteration number one, I guess. But then when we rewrite, we decided we want to use MongoDB, right? And then we also decided we're going to use AWS as our main cloud provider. So naturally, we look into the AWS offering of MongoDB, which is DocumentDB, right? And then great lesson learned for most engineer here, right? Never trust the documentation, because if you look at the documentation or marketing material, you'll think like this is the best thing ever invented, right?
Well, documentation is different than marketing material, in fairness. I mean, I would trust documentation a bit more than marketing material for any company, right?
You'll be surprised. Even documentation, a lot of time is misleading, right?
Right.
And a lot, I mean, devil is in the detail, obviously, a lot of time.
True.
And when you are evaluating a product, right, short of really hands-on and using it, right, most of the time you can only rely on some high-level documentation and you take the words for it and say, okay, right. For example, right, at the time we're looking at the difference between DocumentDB and MongoDB, right, and then there's like a small document listing like 3 things that are different or something like that, right? But then of course when you go in and start doing it, you're like, oh my god, this one's not supported, this one's not supported, and
Yes.
wait a second, right? When we try to here's a good example, right? When we try to dump our database from from DocumentDB, right, it supports the Mongo dump utility, which allows you to dump, right? But then the performance is at least 100 times different, right? So it took us hours and hours trying to dump something from there. And of course, you're not going to find that in documentation. Documentation is going to say, hey, by the way, we're 100 times slower dumping data, right? So yeah, anyway, sorry, enough of that. So we started with DocumentDB. And because we are a search engine of sort for data, right? So of course we also need a search engine. And inside of LinkedIn, we use Elasticsearch. So naturally we say, hey, we're gonna need Elasticsearch.
Of course, you're going to use the tools you're familiar with, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then it get obviously rebranded into OpenSearch on the AWS side, right? So that was the thing that we initially started with, and then at some point we got so fed up with DocumentDB, we got so hamstrung by it, we decided, hey, look, why don't we take a look at Atlas, right? And then we took just one look at it and try it out. Immediately we fell in love with it. We're like, oh my god, why are we paying? Actually, in fact, it was really funny because at that point we're actually paying more for DocumentDB than whatever MongoDB is offering equivalent, right, performance-wise, right? So it was like a no-brainer for us at that point. It was like, why are we doing this? Why are we, making our engineers' life so difficult by giving them basically a crippled version of MongoDB, whereas they could have used like the real one for a cheaper price, even, right? So immediately we jump on that and then went through that migration, and then luckily that migration was reasonably smooth, because if you think about it, DocumentDB is kind of a subset of MongoDB. So whatever we do with DocumentDB almost automatically supported by MongoDB. But obviously no migration.
And the reverse isn't the case, though. But
the reverse is obviously going to be very, very painful. We cannot imagine doing that, right? So, but still, in all, it was a smooth transition into MongoDB Atlas, right? So we're very happy with that. And then very quickly we realized that MongoDB also has a search feature. At the time it was preview, I think, or something like that line, right? And search is commonly supported by relational database or non-relational databases, right? I think a lot of database now has claimed to have search capability. But one thing that caught our eye with MongoDB search is that it is basically built on top of Apache Lucene, right? It's the same engine as Elasticsearch, right? So that makes that transition so much easier because now we don't have to basically rewrite a bunch of our code in order to support some sort of search in some other databases. And then let's face it, like, a lot of full text search offered by a lot of databases are not really fully featured for full text search. It is, once again, a watered down version of full text search. If you really want to do complete full text search, you still kind of have to rely on having an engine like Lucene underneath the hood to be able to support all of that. So we quickly jump on that bandwagon, right? Because we knew that OpenSearch or Elasticsearch on AWS was a big pain to manage, right? And if we are able to leverage Mongo for the same thing, right, relational plus search, it's gonna make that whole maintenance so much easier. Not to mention the cost savings associated with it as well, right? And having the and so that's why we went headed immediately on that, right? And in fact, we basically completely implemented everything, and then do the migration and all that in about 3 to 6 months. We finished all that implementation, but unfortunately at that point we hit a bug essentially, or lack of feature in MongoDB. So that put the whole thing on pause, because without that particular thing, we're hitting. This is to do with pagination and whatnot, right? So without having that, it's not viable as a migration
for yourselves. Yes, of course.
So we have to put that whole migration on pause and then still sort of live off Elasticsearch or OpenSearch for as long as we could. But of course, the MongoDB team was very gracious, and then we met with them multiple times, explaining, the bottom issues and all that, and we got constant update from them about the progress, and we know it's going to be fixed when it comes GA time, right? Which is great. Which also aligned well, because you don't want to go GA a product using some preview feature, right? You try to avoid doing that.
No, definitely not. But I know it. It is frustrating a little bit when you've migrated and moved, and you go, oh, it doesn't do this one thing that we also need, and that you've hit that roadblock, as it were. But it got sorted eventually. Then, so
yes. So as promised, right? When it came GA time, the same thing was fixed, so we were able to roll it out. But the funny bit is, I want to time into another story here, if you may. So at the time, we also started looking into the whole semantic search, or basically, to a great extent, RAG, for lack of better words, right? And this is prior to the whole ChatGPT blow up, right? There's already a lot of research going on there. So we knew that at the time we need a vector database, right? So we look into, at the time, Pinecone as our
Sure.
vector database. And then we had some prototype build of Pinecones and whatnot. And, it works. But once again, there's another external vendor we have to depend on, which is generally not so great. We try to consolidate as much as possible for better management and maintenance. So we decided we will use Pinecone for now because that seems like the only option on the market.
And they were early to the vector space, right? So at a time it was pretty much the only option, right? So
yes, that's right. And of course, fast forward, half a year, we found out that Mongo has a vector DB offering. Once again, this is pre-GA time, right? Preview and whatnot. And it turns out it builds on top of search, right? So you need to have search first in order to have vector.
Yes.
And then we're like, we already migrated all the stuff. We already have
it's
the
another index, right? Yeah.
Right.
It's another
So we very, very quickly rolled out the vector DB based off the code base that we have already written for the Atlas search, right? While we're still waiting on the Atlas search GA bug fix. So we end up actually rolling out vector DB before we rolled out the whole migration to Atlas search.
So you must have been super confident super confident that the team were going to fix your bug because you were continuing to develop, even though there was a roadblock in the way.
Right. I mean, like I said, it builds on trust, right? Because we were able to talk to the team, we were able to talk to the product manager, we were able to talk to engineers, right? So you have that trust. You know that they're going to deliver, and you also know it's not a fundamental ask, right? It's not like, hey, you got to completely re-architect your entire thing in order to support something like this. We know it's more of a bug, an obvious bug or miss from a feature perspective. So we know they'll get to it. And then, but all the investment we spend on migrating to Atlas Search without migrating to Atlas Search paid off at that point. So yeah. And then of course, once we have that, we basically move off Pinecone pretty quickly at that point. So
perfect. And look, that's a good point. Like we talked obviously from DocumentDB to Atlas. We talked about from Elasticsearch over to Atlas Search as well too, and into Vector Search. And Vector Search obviously is, from my perspective with MongoDB, our calling card to participate in Gen AI, regardless of what applications you're building, because as you said, Mars, your data, the vectors of your data are stored alongside your data. They're stored together. So you reduce the round trips, etc. But getting to AI and, kind of how has AI helped Metaphor? You said this was pre-Gen AI, right? So we're talking, there wasn't, as far as the public is concerned, a Gen AI revolution until 2 years ago when ChatGPT jumped on everybody. And it's pretty much, it's probably the 2-year anniversary roughly now. But tell us how AI has helped Metaphor, and hopefully that will be a nice kind of building block towards a bit of a showcase and a bit of a demo for you as well too.
Yeah, sounds good. So actually just think data back at LinkedIn, right? So when we first built DataHub inside the LinkedIn, the main interface is essentially a Google-like interface, right? So it's a search box where you type into terms and then we do keyword-based search, right? Which obviously is the state of the art at the time. But we actually got a lot of feedback from especially non or less technical people saying that, hey, look, I don't know what keyword to type, right? I just have a question, right? I want to type it in a way that's more like English than the keyword, right? I mean, people are very good with Google search keywords because if you think about it, the keywords are everywhere littered in the document, right? So when you type keywords, it's very natural to think, okay, I'm stringing a bunch of keywords together, so naturally I expect them to show up in the search document. And then Google obviously has its own secret sauce with PageRank and all these things. It's able to really rank the most relevant information very high on the top, right? But when you think about searching your data, it's a very different story, right? Especially you're not talking about searching the physical data, you're searching about the metadata, right? What can you do with a keyword, right? You can try to match the table name, maybe you can try to match the column name and all that. But beyond that, what do you do, right? I mean, someone might have a description and all that, right?
Where do you start? Where do you even try to consider what you might need out of the data that you're holding? Definitely.
Exactly, right? So a keyword-based search, generally don't yield very good results as a result of that,
Mhm.
right? And then a lot of time also there's unstructured data, documentation people put together and all that. That's where the real information and knowledge lives, right? So
Mhm.
keyword search generally is not really going to suck out all those information very well. So they have already been a lot of ask inside of LinkedIn where people say, hey, look, can you guys just support like some sort of natural language search, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
back then, obviously, there's no large language model, no nothing, right? That sounds like magic, right? Essentially, like how are you
Mhm.
gonna even go about doing something like that? Right? The state of the art NLP wouldn't even support that very well, right? So that idea quickly got basically shelved.
Okay.
But when we came out, we look at the state of the art in AI, and we realized, hey, look,
That
this,
idea was in the back of your mind then
yeah,
again. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Okay.
we're like, oh, seems like it might be doable, right? It's
Mm.
like,
Mm.
and the state of the art at the time was Facebook's. I forgot the name of it, but there was there's some essentially language model that is basically does pretty well, right, already
Mhm.
at the time. But then of course comes OpenAI and ChatGPT error.
Mm.
Immediately everything click, right? Immediately everybody look at that and say, oh yeah, now it is actually doable, right? It's no
Yeah.
longer magic anymore, right? So of course we invest heavily at that point. And then we do realize that the whole data governance space is half people and half technical, right? Essentially,
Mm.
the
Mhm.
problem,
Mhm.
and then some might even argue is more than 50% of the problem is people, right? But at least there's a big chunk of the problem belongs to people, as in like people problem, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you have to deal with these sort of unstructured data all the time, not just well structured data. So AI, especially Gen AI or large language model, is able to really open up a lot of possibility that was not possible before, right? And of
Yeah.
course, we have been investing heavily ever since then in our product.
Okay. Okay. So I suppose you've been explaining all of the pathway, everything that happened in Metaphor, all the U-turns and dead ends and the refactoring, etc. as well too. Where are we now, Mars? When does when, and it's always kind of like your children, right? When was it, where you could stand hand on heart and go, this is the product that we started to build. This is why we did what we did, given all the U-turns that we had. What time frame are we now, Mars? How long has Metaphor been out in its present form?
Yeah, like I mentioned at the top, we have been around since the launch of the product about 3 years, and we have a lot of adoptions,
Mhm.
mostly in big enterprises, right? For obvious reason, this is a big enterprise problem. The bigger the enterprise, the bigger the problem, right?
Yeah.
So, we have seen a lot of success in that area, and also specifically, we've seen three verticals that are we've seen a lot of pull from the customers, right? So one is your financial services sector, right? Banking,
Mhm. Okay.
investment bank, PE, all these firms that they understand the importance of data, right? And then they're generally pretty large scale, but then of course
Right.
they're highly regulated, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
once again, coming back to the thing I talk about, they are more towards the spectrum of locking everything down. But then they also
Yes. Yeah.
realize that, especially if you think about a PE firm or investment banking firm, right? They realize data is critical to all their success, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So they are also wanted to basically enable opening up data and allow their people to use it. So a data governance tool that helped them to sort of bring down from complete lockdown to more towards, uh, data democratization, right,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
self-service data. That is where they want to be. So there's definitely a lot of ask coming from there. But once again, the overarching theme here is regulation, right? We want to make
Yes.
sure we enable people to use data, but in a way that is regulated or controlled, and then we don't run into any issue with compliance, so to speak.
Okay. Okay. So
Mhm.
I suppose it's probably a suitable time, Mars, maybe to showcase Metaphor
Mhm.
and a couple of examples that you have ready for us, right?
Sounds good. So I'll jump into my screen share. Let me see. I need to bring that up. Um, can you see it now?
Yeah, I've thrown it up there. Hopefully the audience can see it fine as well too. Looks decent in terms of readability on small screens as well, so all good. What are we looking at
Yeah.
here then? So Mars.
So some people will look at this and say, "Wait, isn't this Slack?" And you're right. It is Slack. It is not metaphor. It is Slack. But why do I start from this point, right? Coming back to the same thing we talk about, we realize a lot of people have the question asked and answered in Slack. This is where most of the tribal knowledge live, if you will, right? And then one of the biggest
term, the tribal knowledge,
or institutional knowledge.
Steal that one, Mars. Yeah.
And then of course Slack has pretty good search interface, but let's face it, right? If you have a very busy Slack, there's zillions different conversation threads happening.
Oh yeah, I've lost so much time trying to find conversations through Slack search, and I remember somebody said something, but it's impossible to find. Was it a DM? Was it in a channel? Was it private? Was it public? It's really tough.
Absolutely. The problem there is the signal to noise ratio is too low, right? So you, like you said, you might spend all days doing search, and then maybe if you're lucky, you find it. But guess what? For most people, what they do is they say, well, if I can't search it within 2 minutes, I'm just gonna ask it again. It's
I'm very guilty of that myself. Yeah, I do that too. Yeah,
it's cheaper for me to ask it again.
Yeah,
right. And then of course the cost is essentially on whoever's gonna answer your question. You lay that cost on that person essentially, right? And this is not unusual in a company where they will have a data team channel or ask data channel, or data support channel and whatnot, where essentially people just come in and ask questions all day long, right? And then the data team is on the hook of answering all that question, right? And then very quickly they see the patterns, right? Oh, people keep asking this question. Okay, maybe we should document it. Maybe we should put it in a wiki somewhere. Maybe we should put that in data catalog. But guess what? People are just not gonna go and find those things over there, because once again, same thing, right? I'm in Slack. I need an answer now. I don't know which wiki page to look for. I don't know which document to search for. If I go there and search the global search there, once again, I'm gonna spend all day finding that thing, right? And then if I finally found it, is that up to date? Is it relevant? Right? So like people just quickly give up once again. So even if you document it, almost no one will be able to find it. So what happens is people come back once again, ask the same question, and then the data team will say, "Oh, duh, again," right? They have to go in and answer those questions, right? So one of the problems we're trying to solve here is to enable people to self-service themselves, right? As you can see in this example here, right? People, instead of asking the data team, they're asking this metaphor bot. Let me see if I can show you.
Okay.
Right. So, they're asking things like, oh, which table has transformed version of row by high table, right? This is a pretty sophisticated question, right? And then without Gen AI and large language model, there's no way you're able to find this using keyword search in any catalog at all. But when you ask that, right, the metaphor app will basically do a technical term called RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation. They will take all the information in the catalog, find the one that's most relevant, and then come up with the answer right there. Right, it will point you to the things in the catalog. Right, you can click into it. You can actually go to the website and start digging further into it. But it will give you a suggestion of a couple of things that it thinks is most relevant to your answer.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And these things can actually go pretty advanced. Not just plain old RAG. Okay, that just put everything in vector DB and then just service the nearest neighbor and then that's it. Right. You can do very fancy stuff like hybrid search. Right. Essentially not just getting the thing from RAG, but you can get it from search engine as well and fuse the answer together. Right. You can do graph RAG, where you basically traverse the graph, use graph as a tool to basically traverse the graph and find out things. Right. So for example, if you ask question like, oh, where can I find what data set does this, what table does this table impact downstream? Right. That sort of question metaphor bot can answer that because it has the lineage. It will able to walk the lineage tree and then tell you those answers. Right. So that's the sort of the question and answer part, right? But this is actually only half of the equation here, because people are still going to come in and still asking, instead of asking a person, is asking a bot, right? You still haven't solved the I want to capture the knowledge problem, right? And then you can probably see that, a lot of time, people will come in and then they'll ask a question, and then, like a bunch of people piled in and then answer, sorry, let me find a good example here. Right. You can probably relate to this very well, where people will come in and ask questions and people discuss in the big thread, right? Like for example here, right? Someone asks a question, people come in and answer it back and forth, bring in another person, and then eventually, right after you have like 20 messages in the thread, at that point you finally reach your conclusion. Right? You say, okay, this is great. We have this conclusion. And then, of course, at that point, someone will say, maybe we should document this. So next time when someone asks it, we don't have to answer it again. But guess what? It's a huge disruption to the workflow once again, right? Who's going to go to the catalog or go to the wiki and then start documenting that? And then not just that, right? It's this 20 message thread, right? Someone have to read through all of that and then decide what's
make sense of it, right?
What's to ignore, right? Maybe there's wrong answer in there as well, right? So this is where Gen AI come to the rescue, right? So you can click on this and say, hey, look, you know what? I want to create a knowledge, basically, what we call a post, right? Out of this entire thread.
Wow.
Right? And then not just that, we can say, hey, look, AI, please summarize this into key points, right? And of course, it'll go in and then it'll come back with all the key points in the thread, right? And then you review that, you think this is great. Click save right there and then it goes into the catalog. Right. You don't even need to leave this entire interface to basically record this in the catalog. Just a couple button clicks, done. Right.
And so if that similar question were to be asked again in the future, does it surface up this knowledge base then? So
absolutely, right. That's where everything gets close to a closed loop, from a closed loop, right? So once this is safe, literally within seconds, right, it's gonna be vectorized and put into the vector database and whatnot. And if someone else asks about, a couple of seconds later after this is created, it's going to get that new answer right there and then, right? So this is where this entire knowledge lifecycle is able to be managed in Slack. In this case, you don't even have to leave Slack. Everything is just captures and then replied.
That's incredibly enabling and powerful. I know we spoke about Metaphor's use of MongoDB. I need to put in a big push in MongoDB to use Metaphor inside our Slack. This would save me hours.
We would love to have MongoDB as our customer, and that's for sure.
Definitely. That's incredibly powerful. But you were saying then that's only one portion of Metaphor, right?
That's right. We'll quickly jump into another portion of it, which is like I talk about, right? In dashboarding system, right? Here's an example in Tableau, right? You're looking at a dashboard and you have questions about, so what does these number means and who created this and all that right there and then. And you see, here's Metaphor right here. And I click into it. And at that point, it will bring out, I think maybe the zoom level is, maybe I need to reload it. I think. We play with the zoom level, so maybe it didn't immediately work out. But here you go.
There you go.
Let me zoom it properly again.
That's okay.
Let's see. Right. So right there and then you see, so these are the two people I should talk to because they are the one that's created this, right? And then you also see, this is certified, right? Okay, so someone actually the data governance team come and certify this. So I know this is a real thing that I can trust, right? And then I see someone added some description and say, hey, look, this is how you should do it, and etc. So, so now I get more context around it. Right. And then I can look at all the tribal knowledge once again, right? Remember the stuff that we create in Slack or manually on Metaphor, right? All the tribal knowledge is right there and then. So they can look at it and say, so this is how I should use it. Likewise, if the data team has, say this is deprecated, right? You get to see the deprecation notice and know that, this is a new thing you should be using, or after this state, you should not trust this data anymore, right? Something along that line is so handy. And then those are the questions that you want to ask right there and there. It's going to surface to you right away. Right. Likewise, if you want
as anyone who uses Tableau or other similar tools, there is always that question in the back of your mind: is where did this data come from? Is it up to date? How who's responsible for this dashboard? How do I get a different view on this dashboard? So you're exposing all of that really through Metaphor, right?
That's correct. And then here, you can actually get a mini lineage view here, right? So I know this is the dashboard that I'm looking at, and then it's using this data set. It's called data source in Tableau, right? And it's fed by this particular Snowflake table and that table and that table. And guess what? There's actually a data quality issue with the upstream table. So you actually get a warning sign right there, right? Maybe this data is not trustworthy because there's some data quality issue upstream. So you'll be able to answer all that question right there and then inside of your dashboard.
Excellent. Wow. That's very powerful as well, too. Definitely. So this is the Metaphor platform we're looking at then now, Mars, right?
That's correct. So this is the real web application for Metaphor, right?
Yep.
So you can see this the search, right? And then you can also search with AI. Like I said, the same question you ask in Slack, you can ask it right here, and it'll answer
Okay.
those questions for you. But here, a very quick example, you're looking at a table in Snowflake, right? You see there's some incidents associated with it, so you can actually see what's happening, right? You can see some high-level overview of all the things that, when was the last refresh, how often is it used, etc. You also see some of the details around governance piece, right? The description of it, the tags, who's the main contacts and whatnot. All the related stuff, right? Which document is related to this, and domains and all that sort of thing, right? And this is all, of course, data engineers' favorite thing, which is the lineage graph itself, right? So if you look at lineage, you can see, how the things actually come about, and what does it feed to the downstream and all these things, right? You can see, you can walk the lineage and see what's further upstream and so on and so forth. And you also see how the ETL process is tied to these things, right? So this is at a quick glance how the platform works. Once again, those tribal knowledge is available right there at your fingertip, right? So if you want to take a look at how people are actually using this for particular use cases, you can see them right there and then.
Okay. Wow, I can imagine the efficiency of, well, number one, obviously interacting with your data in a natural language way is incredibly powerful. But B, that capturing that tribal knowledge, as you say, that knowledge base, is brilliant. I mean, as you said, you waste so much time asking probably the same questions, but this is incredible to expose kind of this lineage of everything and where that come from, and to have those alerts and to have kind of the activity feeds. Very, very powerful. Is all of your, I suppose, Metaphor's customers, are they finance, medical? Are they heavy, PII data companies, or is it across the board?
I think it's across the board in general. Those are financial services and healthcare and insurance are the two main area we're focusing on, because like I mentioned, they are very large and they have a lot of these problems, and then they have regulatory pressure on their side as well, right? So there is a lot of pull from those industry, but pretty much every industry out there is coming to the realization that they need data, right? And then yes, some of them might say we need AI, but the reality of it is if they haven't sold out the data, forget about AI, because AI is not going to give you anything if you put in rubbish, right? It's going to be rubbish in, rubbish out, right? So
that's it.
So it has to be you have to get the data sorted first, right? And then a lot of companies are also facing the same problem, right? They're using Snowflake, they're using Databricks. They generate a lot of data, and they have absolutely no clue what kind of data they have, and so forget about even doing proper AI on top of that.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, the ability to generate this data, as you said earlier, much of this data that we have or being captured is unstructured. And without knowing anything about the data, it's very hard to interact with the data. And it could, we've said often a long time ago, data is the new oil, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very much the case in this generative AI world, where you need to have everything kind of so connected, so instant, so discoverable, but at the same time, you need to put in the proper protections and need to know that lineage of where things come from, right?
Yep, absolutely. So that's where we come in, and that's where we hopefully can help companies solve these problems.
Excellent. Well, no, this has been superb. So for folks that are interested in learning more about Metaphor, Mars, where will they go? What's the best thing to do?
So they can contact me directly if they want on LinkedIn, or they could find us our website. We're at metaphor.io. Not AI.io, but hopefully AI one day.
Does somebody else have that at the moment?
It's for sale for a very heavy price, so hefty price. So.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay.
Yeah. But Metaphor.io, you get to us, and you can contact us from our website if you want to as well.
Okay, perfect. And I know that we also did a blog with yourselves as well too back in the day. I'm going to grab a link to that quickly and post that into the comments as well too. This has been super insightful, Mars, to take us from the journey from the open source project inside of LinkedIn to the trials and tribulations of starting up and doing your own thing. It's been a great, I hope, lesson for the audience in terms of, things happen, things are out of your control. Sometimes, as you showed us, the pivot, whilst as painful as that must have been for you, to be able to do with, be 9x more powerful, right? A third less time with a third less resources, and to come up with something that's so incredibly powerful now is brilliant. Any final words for, our audience today about kind of your AI experiences, your founder experiences, and as a CTO, how do you keep up to date? How do you keep ahead of the curve in this ever-changing world?
It is quite hard to say, right? Keeping up is definitely one of the challenges for a lot of people in tech, including
Mm,
myself. But I think having an open mind and keep in tap on like classes and events and streaming and whatnot available out there is a very good way to keep up your knowledge, right? One of my secret is I basically go to Substack and find a lot of tech influencer, for like a better word, and have them
okay.
basically subscribe to their the channels and have that weekly dose of summarized outcomes and whatnot sent to my inbox, right? So I can review them on a weekly basis.
Hmm.
That's kind of my weekend activity while I'm taking care of the kids, just listening to all the podcasts and all these
Yeah.
articles and posts and whatnot. So yeah, that is a very important bit for people who are in tech, right? Because given the speed that tech evolve, whatever you learn today becomes irrelevant in matter of months, sometimes even,
Mm, mm.
right? So keeping on top of it is super important. But I think another thing in terms of the founder aspect of it, I think you must have heard a lot of people say, "Hey, startup is a roller coaster." Right? Literally, it is a roller coaster. You're gonna have days where you feel like you're on top of the world, and there will be days where you feel like you know, everything is falling apart, right? Having a sort of a very strong mind and a strong heart is a critical component for a founder. Right? Being able to always try to look for silver lining, always try to look for things that are turning challenges into positive things
Yeah.
is a very important thing. So
Okay.
mindset, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And Metaphor, you're growing as a team, as a company. You're hiring at the moment as well too, if people are interested in looking at roles potentially.
Yes, we're always open to looking for top talents, right? That is our top priority as a company. And yes, feel free to reach out if you feel like you want to work in this field and then you're interested in what we're doing. We're happy to talk.
Excellent. Mars, this has been super insightful. For anyone who wants to learn a bit more, I just put up on the as a banner there, the metaphor.io address, super easy to remember. So you can jump there. This has been great. Thank you so much, Mars, for your time and insights. And I will certainly chase up our internal team here as to go, why can't we use this on our side? It certainly saved me a lot of time. If you're interested in what we do in this live stream, very similar to what we do most Tuesdays, it's mostly me, but I do share this slot with my colleagues, and Thursdays is more practical hands-on. So do check out mongodb.tv as well too. And I saw a couple of questions come in there. I can't answer them straight away on the live stream. But if you go to community.mongodb.com and post that same question, Nathan, we will get you some answers there too. I can certainly illustrate to you and show you how MongoDB is different in that space. So sorry we didn't take care of that comment live, but we do appreciate that as well too. And obviously on our Developer Center, we create content all the time. So developer.mongodb.com. You'll find most of our articles and tutorials as well too. But Mars, thank you so much for this insightful journey of Metaphor. I can describe it no other way, from the inception to respond to the GDPR issue that was incoming to most tech companies, through to the open source, through to the closed source, but better metaphor, and everything else in between. And the Swift demos, I think you really got across, especially to me, but hopefully to the viewers as well too, I suppose the kind of key benefits of metaphor. So it's always brilliant to have the CTO and founder on board. So Mars Lan, thank you very much for joining us on MongoDB TV.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it immensely as well. Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Excellent. It's great to have you. And for all our viewers, we do appreciate your comments and everything like that as well too. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel, or follow on LinkedIn as well too, to stay tuned to this and other future events. But for now, from me, Shane McAllister, and from Mars, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the live stream. Take care.
Thanks.